we already mentioned, my friend Elizabeth, who I met in Santa Fe, New Mexico, has been keeping in touch with me, and she met Joe at a Course in Miracles meeting in Sedona, Arizona. And she heard his story and put two and two together and emailed me and said, hey, you gotta have this guy. It was a while ago, but we usually book a year or more in advance most often. So it took us a while to get him, but we've got him. And his story is really wonderful, very profound, and we are so grateful to have him here with us today. Please give a warm welcome to Joe Wolfe.
I really liked when Diane started at 2 o'clock, the brief meditation. You can miss her flute, or you really miss something. And I kind of like to do that too before I start. Just take a moment and close your eyes and shake off the cares of the world. Take all the plans and expectations, all the things that you're worried about or concerned about, all the agenda, just put that off to the side for a minute. Close your eyes and breathe deeply in through the nose and out through the mouth. The reason I learned this meditation about 1975, I was doing 10 years in prison from a guy named Ram Das. It stayed with me all these years. And it works for me. And what it does is kind of set the tempo and puts us in a state of mind that's open, at least open to receive anything that might be worthwhile. So just sit quietly and close your eyes and breathe deeply in through your nose, count of 4, out through your mouth, count of 8. The reason why we do that is just to untrap some of the stale air that gets caught. And be conscious of the breath. The breath is important, because if you're consciously aware of the breath, it's impossible to have a negative thought at the same time. It's like trying to sneeze with your eyes open. It's impossible. So breathe deeply and feel life as it flows through every fiber of your being. I won't go through the whole meditation. Usually I do this on Sundays when I host my own group, whenever I host my own group. But I just set you in the tempo that in watching your breath and just sitting quietly, you know that there's a part of your mind that thinks and a part of your mind that can watch you think. And this part, the thinking, this part of the mind is the one that keeps us distracted most of the time. Think about the plans and the expectations and what we got to do and the worries and the concerns. Let's try to stay in that place that watches us think. And in that place, breathe deeply and feel life. And try to feel every fiber of life that flows through your body, from your feet all the way up to your head. And holding that sensation, expand your awareness to include everybody and everything in this room. Feel the people next to you, behind you, in front of you, the walls, the ceiling, the floor. Feel all of that, because in reality there really is no space. There's just oneness. And holding that sensation, expand your awareness to include the whole building, the whole neighborhood, town, the state, the continent, the world as we perceive it as it spins on an axis around the sun, center of a solar system that moves every 200 million years around the outer rim of what we call the Milky Way galaxy, one in millions and millions in the world and the universe as we perceive it. And with every breath in, imagine all of that breathing in with you, with the underlying conviction that beyond all bodies and beyond all planets and stars and solar systems, something exists as substratum for it all. Something holds all of that up. And this something we can traditionally refer to most of the time as Source or God or whatever you want to call it. But this something if we look just over the horizon of our closed eyes, we can see this brightest and whitest of lights. It looms just over the horizon of the eyes. And as it moves closer to us, it gets bigger and bigger. And as we move closer to it, it starts to loom larger and larger until it encompasses all things, is all things. That's all there is. And we can also imagine moving closer to it with a guide, with an angel perhaps, or Jesus, or anybody you want to perceive. And hand in hand, smiling as we walk towards this light. Just before we get to it, an altar appears at our feet. And upon this altar, I would place as gifts to Source, or God, all the things I think I need in this world. All the things that bind me to it. All my points of view. All my notions of what God might be. All the stuff I think I need for sustenance. And I would place these on the gift to God, because I would have no other gods before Him. In keeping with my own spiritual discipline, which we refer to as Course in Miracles, this holy instant together, this meeting together, I would offer to Spirit, be you in charge. For I would follow you, certain that your direction gives me peace. And if I need a word or a thought or just a tranquil open mind, these are gifts I'm going to receive, because He is in charge by my request. And He will hear and answer me, because He speaks for God, my Father, and His Holy Son. Then when you're quite ready, return to the room. Tonight I'm going to speak to you about a personal account of experiences, what I refer to as spiritual experience, mystical experiences. Now, mystical is a pretty, loose word. You hear it mentioned and referred to in all walks of religion or spirituality. But what I mean by mystical is things that occur outside the norm of worldly physics. Things that don't normally occur. If you're sitting here, you already have some inclination of what that means. Because these experiences occurred to me starting I was a child of 3. And I can remember being barely eye level with the kitchen table. And my father was sitting over in a corner here in Chicago, reading the Sun-Times, and he was peering over his glasses at me. He said, "What is this idiot kid thinking of now?" Because he could tell I was looking down at my hands, looking down at the body, and I looked up at my dad and I said, "Dad, what holds all of this up?" And it was a very valid question to me. And he looked at me and he says, "Your bones hold it up. What do you think holds it?" Well, that wasn't exactly the answer I was looking for. So we just dropped the subject. But many years later, while I was doing a 10-year prison sentence, I find out what holds everything up. And I'll share that with you in a minute. The first experience I ever had was the first realization that was here in this body. I was 3 years old. I was standing in the front yard of a farmhouse out in Gary, Indiana. My father, a World War II veteran, had just won custody of me and my brother in a divorce. And he moved from Texas, where we were from originally, called us a buddy, World War II buddy, at his Chicago, and explained his situation. He said, "Come on up here to Chicago, we're going to get you settled, do something with your boys, and find you a job, and you'll be all right." So he packed up his 2 sons and he came up here. But now he's a single parent, so he had to do something with us. Well, the farmhouse in Gary, Indiana was the place he dropped off my brother. And the first recollection I ever had of being in the body, I'm standing there, and my clothes felt tight, uncomfortable. They felt constraining, alien, and I'm wailing at the top of my lungs. I'm crying at the top of my lungs. My brother was playing with a group of kids over here, and my father was up on the porch of the farmhouse, making arrangements for take care of my brother. And but that wasn't the reason why I was crying. It wasn't because of my father got divorced. The reason why I was crying and wailing at the top of my lungs, because there was an experience that came over me right at that moment. There was a feeling that's hard to explain. It's a feeling that I had been here before, and I did not look forward to doing this again. And one of the very remarkable things about this, people talk about near-death experiences when they see a flash of their life appear before them. Well, mine was the reverse. I could see everything in front of me. I could see in flash everything that I was going to experience. And it scared the hell out of me. So that was the first experience. The first experience was the unmistakable fact that I had been here before, temporarily removed to some more peaceful place, and now I'm back again. A lot of people use the word reincarnation. I like to use the word recurrence. And I think the word recurrence might explain it even better, because no matter how many lives you live, there's only one life. No matter how many bodies you exist in. I know for a fact now that there's only one life, and that is the life I share with each of you, God. No matter how many experiences I had in different bodies, there's only one life. But that experience kind of scared the Jesus. But it immediately put me in a place where I wanted to just shun the very memory of it, bury it. And I wouldn't remember these experiences till many, many years later, because I buried them deep in the unconscious part of our brains, our minds that we don't access very much. But the very next experience was when the decision was made to put me in what was called the Carmelite Home for Boys in Gary, Indiana. I was born into a Methodist family, Texas Methodist, and we weren't baptized at the time, but my father chose to put me in a Catholic orphanage in Gary, Indiana, called Carmelite Home for Boys. And the experience happened when one day, very, very soon after I was in the orphanage, I came down with a very serious case of the mumps. And some of us are old enough to remember what the mumps are. Most of you girls aren't, but it was. But the mumps were very serious back then. They were highly contagious, and they had to be quarantined. And I remember the little nun that was assigned to my care. She couldn't have been any taller than this. She wasn't much taller than me. She was just a sweetheart nun. I used to call her my little angel. She was the one who would always be called on to do all the little menial duties. The older, more senior nuns would say, "Here, get me this, get me that, clean this up." She was that, and she would always do it with the most pious gratitude. She would happily go scamper and do whatever they bid her to do. Well, she was the nun who was put in charge of taking care of me during my sickness. And I remember that first night when she tucked me in bed. She brought a bag of root beer barrel candies and put it on the nightstand so I could reach through the wood bars when I wanted one. You know? And she was this nun who I used to toddle behind all the time, normally because in cleaning up her rooms, I'd always follow behind her because she always filled my little pockets up with candy. So I made it my business to hang around her a lot. So anyway, she was the one that was given charge to take care of me. And when she tucked me in that night, she put the candy on my nightstand. I remember falling into a real deep, feverish sleep. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night. Now this is an all-boys orphanage. 3 different categories of boys. Babies, which is the classification I was in, and they have what they call IAs, than what we call big boys. And they were a noisy bunch, let me tell you. So to wake up in the middle of the night and there was no noise was really, it was something to behold. And I remember my cheeks swelled, and my very feverish, and I knew I was very, very sick. I remember rolling over on the back, counting the squares in the ceiling, and I remembered the candy. And I rolled over and got a piece of the candy in my mouth, between my cheek and tongue. And I remember it being very large. And now I put 6 or 8 of them. I wouldn't even know that. But it kind of gives you an idea how small it was at the time. I put the candy in my mouth. There's a reason for the candy. I'll explain. I'm looking up at the ceiling, counting the tiles again. And all of a sudden, through the wooden bars of the crib, a large hand came through, touched me, comforted me, communicated to me that I was going to be all right. It scared the hell out of me too. I'm looking over, I can't see anybody. Now I'm on the wall, one of 4 cribs on the side of a rectangular dormitory. There's not this wall. On the opposite side are large 6-foot windows from which shone street lights of Gary, Indiana. So it was always lighting up the scene room. If there was been somebody standing there, I would have been able to hear something, or at least see a silhouette. There was nobody there. Just a hand. And a comforting reassurance that I was going to be all right. So what I did is I just reached up in my fear. I reached up and grabbed the forefinger of this hand and bit it. I bit it really hard. I mean, at 3 years old, they got a full set of teeth, like needles, you know. And I bit this finger. And I really dug into it. But the finger never flinched. Never even gave an indication that it felt it. Just let me bite it. And when I was through, it just faded away. Then I must have passed out. I threw the covers over my head, shivering, and I remember I woke up the next morning, and I was standing. The light from the windows, shining, the morning light was shining through the windows, and I was standing up at the edge of the crib. The sickness was all gone. Fever was gone. Swelling was gone. There was no sign of any sickness at all. But there was this little remnant of the candy still in my mouth. It was the point of reference. You know, otherwise I would explain it away some way. And later on through egoic definitions. But anyway, the candy was still in my mouth. And my little nun comes running in. Actually, she walked in. She ran out. She saw me. Because the doctor had kind of given up hope on me. Back then, kids died from this stuff. It was very sick, serious illness. They kind of wrote it off. They said, "Good luck, kid." And when she came in, she saw me standing completely well. She was shocked. She put her hands over her mouth, ran out, and got the rest of the tribe. Got the mother of wishes and a whole bunch of nuns, and they come running in there, and they couldn't believe me. And here I am trying to explain little boy terminology because of what had happened the night before. Because the memory of the visitor was very clear. And here I am trying to explain to them, this, come, you know, all of that, right? Well, none of them believed me, of course, except my little nun. I mean, they called the doctor. The doctor came in, checked me out. He scratched his head. He can't figure it out. I never saw a 1 day, not even a full day, of this form of the lumps, which was serious. And I knew that something happened. I was too young to figure out what it was. I wouldn't know until many years later. But when the nun and the doctors, and when the tribe of nuns left, and the doctor left, and all that was left was me and my little angel nun, she picked me up out of the crib and she knelt me down. She put my little hands together. And for the first time, I gave thanks. And that wasn't the most profound experiences. I call these experiences in my book, I call them signs, like signposts on the road, or maybe even taps on the shoulder. Those occasional brief communications you have with Spirit, they're unmistakable. You'll never forget them, and they stand out like earmarks, like bold earmarks on things to remember. The next experience I had, where's Kuan Yin? There she is. Was I think I was 11 or 12 at the time, and I was about 8 before my father got me out of the orphanage and hooked me back up with my brother. We were back together again. He married the sister of his World War II buddy, and we moved to Chicago on the northwest side. And I was up in the attic. My brother and I shared a room up in the attic. And this has occurred in that time between sleep and awake. You're not really asleep, but you're not really awake. It's kind of in that limbo. And I remember it quiet, late at night. And all of a sudden, I'm looking up. My eyes are closed. I'm looking up at this radiant woman. I mean, she was beautiful. She was stunning. She was radiating light in every direction. And she had this headdress and went all the way down to her beautiful sandals. And I'm looking up and I'm blown away by it, because the feeling was of being immersed in love. And when I say love, try to imagine the best experience you ever had with love. Multiply that by 1,000 times. And it doesn't even come close to what I felt. This lady was looking down at me, and I'm looking up at her, and I'm blown away. And I ventured a thought. I said, please let me stay with you. At that moment, she faded away. And I remember getting out of bed, and tears are coming down in my eyes. I run to the bathroom, I wash my face. I run back into bed because I'm going to try to get back into the experience, which was not meant to be. But I can't, it's very difficult to explain this vision. But many years later, my first trip to Sedona, Arizona, I happened to be walking past an art gallery. And there she was. She was a 42-inch statue of Kuan Yin. I didn't know that. I was 50 before I even put a name to her. This happened when I was 11 or 12. Didn't know anything about it. So I ran into the art gallery and inquired about it. I said, who's that statue? And she was in every detail, everything I saw, from her intricate woven ensemble, everything. It was her. And I ran into the gallery and I asked the lady there, I said, who is that statue? She said, well, that's Kuan Yin. I said, who's that? Well, she's the Buddhist goddess of love. So I did some research. I found out that ever since the 13th century, she's been appearing to people all over the world, sharing a glimpse of authentic love. What love really is. Not the puppy stuff that we chase after. Real love. And so that experience stayed with me all my life. But that still wasn't the most profound experience. I'll get to that in a minute. I graduated eventually from reform schools. I wasn't a very good kid. I liked to get into mischief. I was really disillusioned with the grind of the whole hum of what I saw was life. Guys just trudging off to work, complaining all day, drinking beer, and starting all over the next day. I didn't like, nothing made any sense. The world didn't make sense. Politics didn't make sense. Wars didn't make sense, People just didn't make sense. I didn't like it here. And so I thought, as long as I'm going to be here, I'm going to have some fun. My way to have fun was to get into mischief, into trouble. And it started out with juvenile, doing the things kids do when they're shoplifting or stealing cars. And that's how I started. My friends were the neighborhood thugs, the bad boys. And so I fell in step with them and got along real well and had a lot of fun. So they arrested me, and then gradually I went from reform schools to big time. I was convicted of 8 counts of armed robbery. It was back in 1968. I was released in 1976. Almost 9 of the 10 years that they sentenced me. And I remember once while sitting in the cells, laying in the cells, again during between that point of time where you're not asleep and you're not awake, and the experience of this light experience occurred to me, and I'll explain it. It's a little difficult to explain. I remember it started to occur several times. Now, the only way I can explain this to you is imagine it like you're a light bulb, okay? Now the energy, the electricity flows up through the terminal of the light bulb and then goes into the filament and lights it up. That's what makes the light. The energy going through the terminal into the filament. Well, I remember the first time it began to come up. It was coming up from a place so vast. It's like an immense surge of energy that was coming up, and it would get through the terminal, but wouldn't quite make it to the filament. Because I was paying too much analytical attention to it, trying to figure out what's this, you know? Okay, so this happened about 3 times over a period of a few weeks, where I would have the sensation of the energy coming up, almost touching the filament, but not quite getting to it. Then one day, it happened again. And this time, I was going to sit and watch it. I wasn't going to think about it, I was going to watch it. And energy came up and exploded in an explosion of light that I can't even describe to you. My eyes were closed, but I could see the light. And like Diane mentioned, it's not light that hurts your eyes. And it's so encompassing and brighter than the sunlight. And it just blew out onto the gallery. It's filled up my little cell, saturated that little room, and blew out onto the gallery. Now all the rest of the prisoners were asleep, but 40 cells down at his watch station was a guard. And he jumped up at this light and ran all the way down to where my cell was and stopped right in front of it. But by then, the light had dissipated. And it was back into Joe. And he just kind of looked up and down the cell trying to figure out what was going on. Then scratched his head and walked away. He never made a report of it. So that was another experience that really blew my mind. I couldn't figure it out. I didn't know what was this stuff. Am I nuts? What's going on? You know, and all of these experiences were like that. But I always buried them, especially the experience of climbing appeared to, because growing up in a Catholic school later on, I once made a mistake of raising my hand when I was talking about the Blessed Virgin. I said, yeah, I think she appeared to me. But that was the worst thing I could have done. Blasphemy, oh my God, the nuns beat me for days after that. Who do you think you are? So I learned to keep my mouth shut about this stuff and then question my own sanity. You know? Well, after the light experience, there was one more. It was in prison. See, I wasn't a very good convict either, although I was in trouble. Did almost 3 years in solitary confinement. We tried to blow up one penitentiary. Trying to escape attempts. I lost all privileges. There's no way of kind of parole. And they couldn't do anything. I had the attitude where, you know what, hell with you. You do whatever you want to do. I just didn't care. I've given up on the God thing too. You know, God to me was nothing less than a fairy tale. something only the gullible believed in. So I wasn't a very good, wasn't a very good boy at all. And one day, in fact, I was the leader of a second in command of a gang in maximum security prison. And one day I happened to get in a confrontation with another gang leader. This guy was one of the biggest gang leaders in Chicago, black gangs in Chicago at the time. And I think their membership were in the thousands. And he was the big cheese there. And I got into a fight with him, argument. He was in his cell and I was on the gallery talking to him. And I don't even remember what the argument was about. All I know is that when the word came down after the argument, I was in big hot water. In fact, I was going to be killed the next day. So when they locked me up for the evening, about 4 o'clock, I started to worry. One of his Confederates came by with a 5-gallon bucket of hot water they used for passing out for coffee, doused me with it, burned me from here to my feet. And later on, he came by again, and I'm standing at the bars, and he wanted to punch me, I darted, but he managed to grab the lock of my hair and ripped it out of my head. So they were serious. And those doors opened the following day, and the cell doors opened in the morning. I was going to be at least very seriously injured or killed. And that's what I was promised with. So I started to do something I never did before, or hadn't done in a long time. I smoked the last of my cigarette butts and paced the floor nervously. I got on my knees and I begged for help. I begged and pleaded and promised and did everything I could. I said, first of all, and first of all, the guards didn't really like me that much. I wonder why. I wasn't one of their model people, so anyway, I was on my knees begging and pleading for help. And hours went by. I think it was 11 or 12 midnight. The door's going to be open at 6, but at 5, the cell door's upstairs from me in the next gallery up. That's the kitchen help. They're going to be open. They open them at 5, so I'm figuring how many hours they got left to live. And an idea occurs to me. A thought comes to my head. It was a strange thought. Thought said, scribble a note and hand it to the next guard that walks by. That's not the kind of thought that Joe would have thought of at that time. It seemed to come from someplace else. First of all, scribbling a note, that meant stupid, and in the penitentiary, it's not snitch. It was unheard of. You don't tell on people. And number 2, guards didn't come by. They rarely came by. Well, I listened, and I scribbled a note. I'm in trouble. Kill me. Please help. Well, don't you know, a lieutenant of the guard, no less, happens by myself. I reached the note out to him and I said, please help. He looks at me, sees the state I'm in, the hair missing and scalded a little bit, so he took the note, I wide saucer plates, and turned around and left and went from where he came. Now this had to be midnight-ish, right asleep, and I'm sweating. I'm really getting down to the last few hours. I know something terrible is going to happen. So 1 o'clock goes by, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and I'm thinking, oh boy, is this guy maybe just ripped up my note and threw it in the garbage, knowing who I was and not really caring. All these thoughts are going through my head. These thoughts about how I'm going to get it tomorrow. Anyway, 4 o'clock comes by, 5 o'clock comes, and I hear the guards upstairs rally their big heavy keys on the cell doors of the kitchen help. Now I lose all hope. I'm dead. But at that same time, You know, all this time I'm on my knees begging. I mean, for hours I stayed on my knees begging. But about the same time I hear a bunch of noise down at the other end, at the lower part of the gallery. And this noise happens to be a lot of guards. They come up, it's a captain, a couple of lieutenants, one of the ones that originally took my note, and a whole host of guards. They come to my cell and lock it, shackle me up, and take me away. I'm walking away from the cell house. They're taking me to this detention building away from the cell house. And I'm thinking, I am thinking, like you wouldn't believe, I know I'm safe now, at least temporarily. So they take me to this detention holding cell, and they say they're going to come back and get me interview me, interrogate me, find out what's going on. So they take me out to the administration building. And there I'm met by a representative from Springfield that drove all the way up from Springfield during the night to come meet with me. And they could see the shape I was in, saw my hair. And they gave me a lie detector test just to verify that I was telling the truth. You know? And they put me in the station wagon and they shipped me from a maximum security facility that day to a minimum security facility. I've written about that. It's like going from a dungeon to a 5-star hotel. And it just does not occur. This doesn't happen. And all the way, I'm in this station wagon, this Illinois State station wagon, and the thoughts that were going through my head was, how could I have ever doubted you? How could I have ever possibly doubted you? You've always been here for me. You've always picked me up when I've fallen down. You've always been here. You know? But that wasn't it. They take me to this new place, and they put me in the maximum security facility within the minimum security facility. And it's like an interim. It's like you go through several weeks, in my case it was months, of just watching, observing. Well, anyway, they opened up this room. I call it a room. It was more like a room than a cell. I went in there and there was a real bed. There was a window that opened up to the trees and sunlight and grass. There was hot and cold running water. There was a pillow. There was a desk I could write. And when they locked the door behind me and they left, first thing I did was I got on my knees. And I thank God for what could have been nothing less than divine intervention. Couldn't have been anything else. I was convinced. And I stayed on my knees for a long time in gratitude. Thanking, and thanking. I mean, I think I stayed on my knees for a couple of hours. But as long as I'd been begging for help the night before. And when I began to get weary, I got up from off my knees and I laid down on that bed. In the instant my head hit the pillow, that's when it happened. A strong, vibrating sensation began to overcome the whole body. I can't describe it. I'll try to describe it as much as I can, best I can. It was a real comforting sensation. It just enveloped the whole body. Then there was a sense of rising above the body. And not just rising, but expanding to include everything in that cell. I became that cell. Every molecule of air, the sunlight that shone through the window, the ceiling, the floor, everything within about 100-foot radius of the cell was me. While the body laid on the bed, I, the essence of who I really was, expanded to include everything around me. It was gentle, but all powerful. It felt like the loving embrace of a father or mother for a child. And it held me there for a few minutes, and then gently placed me back in the body. And I got up, And I looked around. I said, what was that? what was that? I mean, this had to be something to do with the God stuff. You know, I told you, I already given up on God. To me, that was kind of like a fairy tale. But this had to be something. This was like nothing I've ever even been told about. See, I never studied the Bible. I was not a Bible thumper or holy roller. I never read any books on the subject. You know, I've had experience, and these experiences were, I like to say, likened to the cart before the horse. You know, so I had experience of the love of God. And some of you who were in the room happen to know me. Every time I use a salutation, I go, love, light, and the peace of God. Well, the glimpse of love was Kuan Yin. The light was the light explosion in the south. And the peace of God was that peace I felt when He lifted me gently for a few minutes, kissed me, and told me again that everything's going to be all right. So, from that moment on, life turned around. I was a career criminal up to then. If you'd know me 35 years ago, see me come in your direction, it'd probably be better if you walked across the street. Not somebody you want to run into. It's not a very warm and compassionate person. All I cared about was my own gratification, my own temporary gratification, getting by the shortcut way. You know? And anyway, I was convinced that this and this whole series of experiences, which I was later able to connect, were very important. And now, after this last experience of being out of the body, and for a good period of time, I had to find out what this was. Where did it come from? And how could I feel it again? So, the administration watched me for a few months, and they were astounded by what they saw. They saw a total radical turn completely around. And they let me out of that cell after a while and put me in a kind of a dormitory atmosphere with other convicts. I got a job, learned how to lay brick, and actually let me outside the fence. And books started to fall in my lap. And the first book that ever fell in my lap was this book that I learned in meditation I share with you. A book named Remember, Be Here Now by Ram Dass. And I absorbed that book. I read that book page to cover, and I learned in this book that I wasn't the only one that this happened to, this experience. That it's happened to other people. That they've experienced identical situation. So I wasn't nuts, okay? This has actually happened to others. And so other books fell into my lap. I picked up books by Peter Ouspensky, Fourth Way, Gurdjieff, All and Everything. And I gravitated towards those books because they seemed to be what I needed at the time that I needed it. In fact, I studied them for the next year and a half until I was released. And when I was released, I was like the runner at the starting gate when they shoot the gun off, you know. I'm going to go out and find out what this source was. And I was armed with the teachings of the books that I had in my possession at that time. Metaphysical, non-dualistic, not the typical fire and brimstone stuff that we normally hear. And my father picked me up from prison. He drove me home. And I said, Dad, I got to do something first. I got to take a walk. So I walked a mile to the first payphone I could get to, and I called the Theosophical Society right here in Wheaton, Illinois. Right away, I called them and I explained the situation I was in, the experiences I had, and I was still ringing, like somebody really rung my bell with that experience. So I was really ringing with the urgency to know what that was. What was that? How can I access it? How can I be more in tune with that? I know that's reality. And this, what I'm experiencing now, like I've known all along, had to be something greater than what the eyes could see. So I called the Theosophical Society, and they connected me with a group called the Gurdjieff Society. I stayed with them for 7 years. Every week, we meet in groups like this, circles, We just discuss and meditate, talk. It got to the point where I think the ego stepped in. You know? Ego has a way of defining everything and trying to set things right and pat you on the back when it thinks it needs to, but explaining things to you. And I got to the point where I wasn't getting what I wanted to out of these meetings, and I was telling myself, well, you don't really need that. Just be a good guy and don't worry about that stuff. And I was torn between staying with the search and leaving it. And so I left. And what happened when I left the search, this was like a downward spiral, a crash landing. Okay? Started to drink heavily, started to use drugs, lost my family, house, home, possessions, lost everything. I fell off the path for some 18 years, I want to say. Now I worked the whole time, I made money, but it supported my drinking and whatever else I was doing. But it completely threw me off the path. The need for personal gratification, temporary gratification, the worldly things I thought I needed. And one day, about 50, just before I was 50, by chance, I communicated with a woman who's now dead. She lived in Whiting, Indiana. And she sent me a book called Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh. And I loved that book. I mean, she sent it to me, and I absorbed that book. And it reawoke the need in me for the search. And so the recollections came back. The experiences came back. And so I decided right then and there that I got to be back around these like-minded people. I have to get back in tune with what I intended to do. I got to find out what this is about. And so I made up my mind to really divulge myself in this, and I actually started a group meeting that goes on to this very day in Chicago. I don't host a Conversations with God group anymore. But the first group was held in LaGrange some years ago, 5 or 6 years ago. And I invited everybody who had any interest in this to come. Bring whatever books you want. You know, bring Neil Donald Walsh, bring any book you thought was pertinent. I'd like to just be around you, hang around you, spend some time with you, and have these weekly meetings, which I did ever since then. And some of the books that the people brought were books by Dr. David Hawkins, who lives in Sedona, Eckhart Tolle, some of the big names and people we all know. And Conversations with, Course in Miracles came into that, and Gary Renard. And when I heard this Course in Miracles, I understood it to be, after some explained, that it was a simple process of application of a spiritual discipline. And that made sense to me. And we can go to group meeting after group meeting, read book after book after book, but here was something I could do with what I thought I knew, right? I could apply it everyday life. And this is a teaching that's been going on for thousands of years. It teaches authentic forgiveness. Authentic forgiveness. But forgiving yourself for what you think you see through 5 very limited senses. Totally eliminating all need to judge, blame, host opinions, positions. It was a way to integrate truth with what I perceived as reality. And I embraced it like a treasure map. And I heard, this message actually came from 4 or 5 different places. One girl said, "Joe, did you read this book?" Another one said, "Did you read this book?" And another one handed me a CD. Another one handed me another book. And they're all on this Course in Miracles. So I said, you know what, I'm going to check this out. So the first thing I did was, one of the gifts I received was a 2 CD set written by Gary Renard. Well, Gary Renard is well-renowned, world-renowned author of The Disappearance of the Universe. And I put the 2 CDs in my car, and I think for the next year and a half, that's all I listened to. There was no radio or anything. I just listened to that over and over again. It's such a mind-blowing, enlightening teaching. It comes from not some evangelical type, you know. It comes from one of us. And the way he describes it was just so endearing to me that I loved every minute of it. And so I picked up the course, started doing the course. And the course is very simple. All it is a course. It's a course in how to do something, integrate what you do normally on a daily basis with forgiveness. And not the kind of forgiveness that lets people off the hook, but forgive yourself for your own perception. Because what makes you happy might make this person not happy. So we know, as we think we see something, that's what appears. But if we use forgiveness in it, it dispels all preconceived notions. It gets to the heart of something. You're able to laugh at situations that you normally react to. And I'm not going to go real deep into ideology, but only just to say that what the Course did for me is to verify with distinct, unmistakable clarity that most of the time I'm scatterbrained. Most of the time I'm reacting. Most of the time I'm judging. Most of the time I'm condemning. I waste so much time in that thinkingness